Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to the Sustainability Podcast, where we're having a discussion about the world of people with disabilities. And that means we're going to be talking with adults with disabilities, with parents who raise them, and a lot of different people who support this community. That might be educators, might be folks in healthcare, or my guest today, folks involved in many nonprofits that support this community. I think you're going to be really excited to listen to our guest today because she has lived a life herself. She's a parent herself, and we'll talk about that. But now she's the leader of a great organization in my home state, Kentucky. And we'll hear all about the work of the Spina Bifida Association of Kentucky. Sarah Richardson, the new interim director of SBAK. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So glad to have you here. Now, my listeners know, and I think I told you beforehand, just to give you a warning, even though we're talking about the world of people with disabilities, we're all just people. So we like to start off with a rapid fire round of the rapid four or the fast four, which is brought to us by my friends at Reliable Tech Help. So if you have technology needs, reach out to Reliable Tech Help at 502-797-7399. That's tech with a K, not a CH. Okay, Sarah, the fast four. What is your favorite sweet food?
A favorite, how can you pick just one? I've not met a sweet food that I didn't like. I'll take cheesecake and brownies and sweet rolls, cookies, whatever you have to give me, I'll take.
So if I say, what's your favorite sweet food? You say yes. Sweet food.
Exactly.
I love it.
Bring them on.
All right. Number two, let's go with music. What if we were to look at your playlist? What is a type of music or a band we'd see pop up?
Ooh, I love a lot of things, but I'm going to say the Lumineers are my favorite right now.
Okay, there you go. I love it. Okay, number three, favorite TV or streaming show that you're enjoying?
I would say anytime I get the remote away from kids playing with slime on YouTube is a really positive thing in my life. So, um, I really couldn't say like one favorite show. I haven't gotten to watch TV in my living room in months. So,
There you go. So your favorite is just when you get a few seconds where the remote is yours.
yeah, and sometimes I just like to turn it off so I'm not constantly listening to YouTube in the background. Like it is this the soundtrack of my day.
Well, that's a good transition to the number four, which is if we were to whisk you away to some location around the world, what's your dream getaway trip?
Would it be bad to say like a cave in the middle of nowhere where my children couldn't find me?
I like that. And you're totally unplugged.
Yes, completely.
I kind of see a theme running through these answers. I love it. All right. Well, thank you for playing along. So there's so many topics along this journey that we could talk about. But I know in doing research for my book, you and I had a conversation, and you had some really great insights and personal anecdotes from the world of medicine. You know, a lot of when you're thrust into the world of special needs parenting, you inherently are talking with doctors. There's surgeries, there's recommendations, there's all these different things. And especially for those of us who are lay people, it can be pretty overwhelming. So tell our audience a little bit about kind of your journey in learning to interact with medical professionals as a parent, and then some of your lessons learned the hard way. You might have the scars to prove it. And I guess then your advice, knowing what you know now.
Yeah, well, it is definitely a wild ride. So I would say that you learn as you go. So you have this baby that has these additional medical needs, and you probably know very little to nothing about what those needs are going to be until you're, like you said, thrust into that world. And so I know growing up, I thought that doctors were the smartest people, and I wasn't going to be a doctor. And so to feel like I earned like my little honorary medical degree having Avery and being able to like ask questions that didn't make me feel like an idiot or like push back when I felt like I wasn't being heard or listened to. And that took time. I know other parents in our community talked about like their mama bear comes out. And that is like true words have not been spoken because Avery has taken me on quite the ride. She's 8 now. So we've been through a lot of things. But when we first would go to the hospital, and something would be wrong, we needed testing done. Like I deferred to the doctors, even if they were like residents or even med students, to tell me what they wanted to do and what needed to be done. And sometimes I didn't agree with that, and I didn't really push back until we ran into a few fairly significant setbacks. So the first one was a shunt failure. So with spina bifida, hydrocephalus is often a secondary condition, and a shunt is used to drain excess fluid off the brain into the belly cavity. So Avery was just off to me. No one else noticed anything. And I was noticing things that really weren't signs, but it was my gut feeling that something was going on. So I called the doctor multiple times, left messages, took pictures of her. I was like, oh, the veins on her forehead are more prominent, or she has a busted blood vessel in her eye. And so they're like, none of that is a symptom. Like, you're okay. How's she eating? And I'm like, great, she's eating all the time. How's she sleeping? Great, but something was off and I couldn't put it into the words. And so eventually, they went ahead and called me in to do just a routine testing where she would get a CT scan and check the fluid levels. And we left the hospital, drove 45 minutes home. We were almost home. We were 2 streets away from our home. And I said, I wonder when they're going to tell me like how it went. And I called back and they said, well, actually, your neurosurgeon is out of town. We have to wait for the on-call doctor to read the scans and let you know. And by the time we pulled in our driveway, is about 3 minutes later, they were like, Miss Richardson, can you get to the ER right now? Your daughter needs surgery.
Oh my
And
goodness.
yeah, so we ran in the house, grabbed some clothes, and went right back out to the car and to the ER. And she had surgery the next day. And so that was at about 9 months old. So that really showed us that Avery is not a by the book kid. So she doesn't do things as we're expecting her to do. And she's had multiple other shunt failures, and only one of them was textbook, where she actually ended up having a surgery the day before her routine scan because she was a textbook shunt failure at that point. But if I hadn't kept calling and they didn't want to just like, okay, this mom, she's not going to give up. So let's go ahead and just get her in here. And then if I hadn't called back that day, when would it have been a priority for them to get us in and realize that this was an emergency situation? So there was that. I feel like I have too many stories of these where I had to push back, but Avery has had a lot of UTIs and kidney infections in her lifetime. And so there have been times that we would go in and it would be during flu season or there was a stomach bug going around. And so the doctor would be like, oh no, it's just a stomach bug. I guess they didn't want to use too many resources and they would send us home. And then it would just get worse and worse. And so there was at one point where we were admitted to the hospital for a week after I went to the ER 7 times in 3 days.
Oh,
And I felt like a crazy person. Like, there is no, like, they're not listening to me. And I would call my pediatrician and she was like, go back to the hospital. And it was horrible just to keep fighting that same battle. But eventually someone listened and she was able to get better. She needed to be on IV antibiotics. And then when she went home, she even needed an NG tube for further antibiotics that she couldn't tolerate by mouth. So it was quite the journey. When we went home with the G tube or NG tube, they had been talking about even doing a central line, which is a surgery, and she would have to stay in the hospital with that. And it was a nurse from another floor that was just filling in that mentioned to us, she just whispered it when the doctor had left the room, ask about an NG tube. We had never even heard of that. And so when the doctors came in, we said, can she get an NG tube for the medication? And they were like, well, we'll have to talk about it, and they went out and conferred and came back in and they're like, yes, you can go home with that. So
wow.
that was a nurse helping us advocate. And so in my role at SBAK, I've visited nursing colleges like Ivy Tech and shared the importance of nurses in like the family unit to help us because they have knowledge that we don't have. But with the hierarchy, a nurse would not say, "Oh, doctor, I think this is what you should do for your patient." But as a parent, who has grown comfortable in questioning everything, I had no issues doing that. So we've had a lot of situations like that on our journey, but it's worked out. I've got this honorary medical degree that I'll tell you about anytime.
So with those two examples, and those are really poignant, what do you think is the takeaway? What did you kind of have to learn the hard way? And what advice would you give to younger parents navigating the world of medicine?
Oh my gosh. So maybe we'll call doctors the expert, but I'm going to call parents, especially moms, um, an expert on our child.
Mhm.
So that is not nothing, is very like important to listen to a parent that is taking care of their child day in and day out. You know when something's not right, and maybe you don't know exactly what it is, but you know when your child needs medical attention. And you can't let somebody, just because you think they might be smarter than you or they have a higher degree of education, to tell you that no, you need to back down and be quiet and let us do our work because this is your child.
Mm, that's
So
really good.
I'd say put on your battle armor and go to it
Yeah. As one who has the scars to prove it, right?
for sure.
So another topic that comes up when you're in this middle of this storm of doctors and all this kind of thing, the needs of the rest of the family sometimes come up. And I've had conversations with a lot of parents about siblings or even their relationship with their significant other. Talk to me about, because Avery not being your only child, talk to me about how that was in your family, your road in that journey. And then again, what did you learn from it? What advice would you give to parents?
Yeah, so Avery's actually a middle child, so I feel like we have a unique experience with having an older and a younger. And it's been very interesting to watch my two other children grow up around this. So, my oldest, Olivia, was 3 when Avery was born. And I remember like we had so many doctor's appointments. It was really overwhelming in the first year. So many follow-ups and so many specialists. And I would drop Olivia off with my sister-in-law or my mom and say I'd be back in 2 or 3 hours. And then there were several times that Avery was admitted straight to the hospital from these doctor's visits. And I had left my oldest daughter, who was still just a kid, at someone else's house with no clothes and no idea about when I was going to come back and pick her up. And so luckily, I had a village around to help me. And maybe they didn't want to be that village, but they weren't planning to keep this little girl at their house for 4 days. But they stepped up and did it. And, she didn't lack for love and attention, but she did miss out on having her parents around as much as she should have gotten. And I know when Avery was, I think maybe she was 1. So Olivia would have been 4. We were at the mall getting pictures with Santa, which is a rite of passage that we gave up with 3 kids because that was just too much. But Santa had asked Olivia what she wanted for Christmas, and she asked for Spina Bifida. And I feel like my face just turned crimson, like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe this. And so the Santa, he did not know what to say. Like he didn't
Right.
know if he should tell her, oh, we'll just keep being a good girl, or what is that? So she came back and I said, Olivia, what is spina bifida? And her eyes lit up and she was like, oh my gosh, it's going to camp, which we get to do with the Spina Bifida Family Camp that SBAK sponsors at the Center for Courageous Kids. She said it is going away with mom and dad. Like she thought it was like a vacation, but it was a hospital stay. She's
Wow.
like, it's getting a ton of stuffed animals. And that was because like Avery spent her first birthday in the hospital. And so, or she had surgery or she had to give blood. And so there were so many things that Olivia was not seeing the full picture. And so to her, she was just getting the unicorn and rainbow aspect of it. But she's like, that's what I want. And so it really opened my eyes to like what her experiences were. And then when my youngest came along, Emery, she's never not known a sister to have a disability. So whenever Avery is like saying, I can't do this or I can't do that, then Emery's happy to jump in and help her and do things for her, even though she's younger. And I'm like, you don't have to do everything, for your sister. And so sometimes I worry that she's treated almost like a service animal, like she's Avery's little pet to do whatever she needs done. And so it's very challenging to navigate being a parent when you have this dynamic that's been built. And so I know over the years, sometimes Olivia would be like, well, I didn't ask for you to have a daughter with a disability. And I'm like, yeah, nobody like puts that on their wish list. And then I tell her the story. Well, you did. You asked if you could have one.
Right.
So, she just thinks that's hilarious that she had asked Santa for spina bifida. But it's so much shows how spina bifida, and I guess really any disability, affects the entire family. And you
Right.
think, oh, well, you're not the one with spina bifida. You don't have to fight these fights or struggle with these challenges. But we all have challenges that are a little different because of Avery's challenges. And just like when she's going through something, my other kids feel it. Like they'll know, like Avery's sick, or sometimes they'll come home from school crying because she had to be taken out of school early and they didn't know what happened to her. They get on the bus and she's not there. And so they're like, oh, where was she? And I was like, she had to go to the doctor or the nurse sent her home because she had a fever. So there's a lot of different things that you don't realize how affected the siblings are going to be in these situations. And you kind of have to learn. So one of our big things is just I try to make sure to have one-on-one time with each of them. And I
Yeah.
have to say, one-on-one, I don't really want to live in a cave or be taken away, but all three of them together, that's when I start fantasizing about those getaways to a place where they can't reach me. But they all have such different personalities that are so fun, but together they like to clash because they are siblings. When
Right.
I first met my first parent with that had a child with spina bifida, she had said to me that her kids like fight and act like siblings and um like do all the things, and so that she found like a great deal of peace in that they weren't like coddling their child with a disability. And I really see that like my girls would fight anyone that said anything bad about Avery, but they'll be the first ones, the first ones to call her out on anything. And so while as a parent it's like frustrating at the time, you're like, please stop doing that, please stop instigating these fights, and all the things. But deep inside, I'm not going to let them hear this, but I'm really happy that they have a typical sibling relationship,
Right.
because those like butting heads and all the things, that is what I did with my sister.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing like that story, the just putting it through her eyes. So powerful, so powerful. So another topic that you and I talked about, and it's a challenge for any parent, is finding the right level of expectations to set for your kids. Those parents who want to kind of step in and protect their kids from harm, and parents that let kids kind of fall down and learn how to get back up. That's a part of the parenting journey for any kid, regardless of their ability or their challenges. But then you throw in special needs journey. Sometimes people want to step in a little bit more, maybe like that kid's already suffering so much, let's step in and help them. How has it been for you? And when you look at your other parents that you support through your work, what is your best insights on setting that right level of expectations?
So I would say, like I tell everyone, the hardest part about raising a child with a disability or spina bifida specifically is the raising the child part.
Right.
Like it is so hard to set expectations for any of your kids. Like my oldest is 11, fully capable of unloading the dishwasher, but when I ask her to, she's like, ah, throwing a tantrum. And even now she did it. And the stuff that has been in the same pantry for 6 years, or the same cabinet for 6 years, she couldn't remember where it went. So she just piled it on the counter.
Of course.
So, yeah. So, I feel like setting expectations for any kid is very challenging. I know when my oldest was little, so right after Avery was born, she um, ordered something on Amazon through my Kindle, and I didn't even know kids could do that, that you could
Oh,
just
good.
like whatever. So she ordered a gumball machine, a glass and chrome gumball machine. So it wasn't like a cheap plastic one, it was a fair amount of money. And I was like, where did this come from? And I had it just sitting on the kitchen table, like questioning, like, what is this? And she comes in and she was like, did you get the present I got you? And I was like, what? And she was like, you got it. And I was like, what happened? And so I tried to return it, but because of how it was shipped, and I think Amazon, this was a while ago, so Amazon wasn't quite as accessible with their returns as they are now.
Yeah.
Um, it was going to charge me $20 more than it cost originally to ship it back. And so I was like, we now have this glass and chrome gumball machine. But I told Olivia that she was going to have to work off her debt
Right.
by like cleaning and doing things like that. And all of a sudden, like her back hurt every time she bent over, and it's just too hard to do it. And so I'm like a new parent to Avery at the same time. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Olivia has spina bifida too. And so I'm like taking her to the doctor to get her checked out. And no, she did not have spina bifida too. She was just a kid that didn't want to do any chores.
Absolutely.
And like they're still like all three of them. My youngest is actually the most helpful. She actually helped me around the house today. And I just had to give her a coin for every chore. So it could be a penny, a nickel, or a dime, or a quarter. Her favorite are the nickels because I think she thinks because they're bigger than dimes or pennies, they're worth more. But like the other ones, like Avery would say for the longest time, she would say, my hands don't work. It's like, no, that's not the case. And she's like, I don't know. I don't know what it is, but I can't pick up those toys. Or they would say things like, oh, that's your job, mom. And so then we talk about gender stereotypes and roles. And I'm like, I don't think this is very fair. So trying to navigate just raising a child with expectations and chores. I think chores are so important. So we do a lot of things where Avery's list might be a little different than her sister's. And we put some of her personal care stuff on her list. They don't have to worry about some of those personal care things, but she does, like skin checks and things like that. If she was wearing her braces, just to make sure that her feet are dry and clean and things like that, that her sisters don't, but we count that as some of her chores. And sometimes when she doesn't want to do something, she'll say, well, I have special needs, or I have spina bifida. And I'm like, I do know that. And I've been called in the very beginning a helicopter parent, and I did not like that. That rubbed me the wrong way, because I was just being a parent. Like she was a baby. Now she's older and the expectation's a little different. And I think some people out in society might see me a little differently because I do not like cater to her. Like, if she falls down, I'll say, come on, get up, like, let's go. And
Right.
I don't like call a lot of attention to it or say, oh my gosh, are you okay? Because I've learned that that makes it worse. Like, she has learned over the years, she's like a great faller. Like, she knows how to fall and she'll pop up and say, I'm fine. She doesn't want somebody to fuss over her or worry about it or even help her up. She's got it. And so maybe a stranger seeing that is like, that lady is so mean. She's not even helping her little girl who fell. And I'm like, this is the 74th time she's fallen today. Like she's good to go. Like she doesn't need anybody to ask her how she is. She'll tell me if she needs help. Um, And generally it's because like she needs help picking up her toys because her hands aren't working, which has nothing to do with spina bifida. And my youngest daughter, sometimes her hands stop working too. It's
Funny how
like,
it works.
yeah, it's like an epidemic. Like everyone's hands stop working when there's toys on the floor.
I love it. Well, thank you for sharing. Now, I want to know, and I'm sure our audience does, we've thrown around this term Spina Bifida Association of Kentucky. So I guess origin story, how did you get involved with them on the professional level? Tell us a little bit about the work you guys do and like what you've got going on right now.
Okay, well, I actually think the Spina Bifida Association of Kentucky is amazing. So my first encounter was when I got Avery's diagnosis. And so I didn't know anything about spina bifida. I'd heard the term, but beyond that, I had no idea what I was getting into. So immediately I called and sat down with the executive director at that time and asked all my crazy questions, and they were very patient with me. And then Avery was 2 months old. We went to our first program and it was a play date. And so, you know, infants in car seats can't, or carriers can't really do a lot of playing, but it was more for the parents to get to know each other. But we met a family there with a little girl who's about the same age as Avery. She's a little bit older. And these two girls have grown up together. Like they are best friends now. They play together on the Miracle League. They went to school together for a while. We get together outside of Spina Bifida Association of Kentucky events. In fact, like Avery thinks that she should get to see Rory wherever she goes. We went to IKEA once and she's like, "Where's Rory?" I'm like, "What?" Like, we're just going to IKEA as a family. And she's like, "What?" So she really didn't understand because so much of the fun things that we've done over the last 8 years have been with other families also affected by spina bifida.
Yeah.
So that's like my first experience, how I got involved. And I wanted to go to every program. I wanted Avery to grow up in a world where she didn't feel alone, like she was the only person.
Yeah.
And in a selfish way, I didn't want to feel alone either. I wanted to have that support of other parents that are facing the same challenges, that are walking the same road as me. And so I would schedule, I worked at Kroger in management. So I would schedule vacations and days off based on SBAK events.
Right.
So I wanted to make sure that I could attend as much as possible. And some days when I couldn't make it work, I would arrange to take a lunch and meet my mom or whoever happened to be watching the girls that day so that we could go do the event really quick and then I could head back to work and they'd still get to have that experience. So I had just had my third Avery Emery. I do that all the time. I mix up all my kids because 3 is the equivalent of 30 in all honesty.
Yeah. There's no
So
longer man-to-man defense. You got it.
yes. So, but when I had my youngest Emery, I was working at Kroger and I had just gone back after maternity leave and Avery had gotten really sick and I had actually left for lunch. So it was around Easter and I left for lunch, went to the Easter event so she could get her picture with the Easter bunny. And she ended up getting really sick and running a very high fever. So we had to go to the ER. So I called work and I said, "Hey, I'm going to take a side trip to the ER just to make sure everything's okay. I'm going to be a little late." I had left everything at work. Like all my work stuff, all I had was my wallet. I just planned to be gone for an hour.
Yeah.
And Avery ended up being admitted to the hospital for a week, a full week. She
Oh,
had a
good.
kidney infection. She needed IV antibiotics. And, I messaged my bosses and let them know what was going on. And it was more so like, "Oh gosh, keep us updated." And then the messages were, "When will you be back? Like, can you work tomorrow? So and so hasn't had a day off yet." And all I could think was like, "I'm in the hospital. I'm wearing the same clothes that I wore 3 days ago. Like, I don't know what's going on. My daughter's very sick." And so I started thinking maybe I should be a stay-at-home mom because I had an infant daughter at home that my husband was having to take care of full time while I was in the hospital with our 2-year-old. And right about that time, the program director, her name was Cindy, and I'd grown very close to her attending all the programs. She
Right.
had reached out and said that she regretfully was leaving her position at SBAK because she'd made a decision for her family, and she had found a different job that she needed to take, and she would really miss us. And all I could think was, well, who's going to do it? Who's going to have all the programs? And she was like, I'm not sure. They're hiring for it now, but I'm sure whoever it is will be great. And I said, do you think I could do something like that? And she said, yes. And so I applied, and I really doubted that. I had no nonprofit experience. I was like, I'm just going to give it a chance. And so that was 6 years ago. And I got the position, and I moved up to program manager, and then I moved up to program director, and now I'm acting as interim executive director. So like I stuck it out. I love SBAK. It is more like a family than really a place of work. And I love what I do. I love all the families and the support. Like having that community is the most important thing to me. And I get to build that community for other families too and connect people. It just brings me so much joy.
Fabulous. If only you could get a little more excited about it.
Am I too excited?
You're never too excited. I love it. So tell us, what do you guys have coming up? I know I've seen on social media, we're now in the month of October, and it's like you guys are kind of maybe wrapping up statewide, doing some of your fundraisers and awareness builders. What have you got coming up?
So October is actually Spina Bifida Awareness Month. And so coming up on the 25th is World Spina Bifida Day. And I believe that the Big Four Bridge will be lit up in teal to celebrate. And then our biggest walk and roll in Louisville is actually on October 28th. So we host that. Our offices are located at the Cozair for Kids campus on Eastern Parkway. And so we actually host that event in the parking lot. And when we say walk and roll, a lot of people think, oh, that's a very challenging, like a 5K or something. It is not. I always tell people the walk is more ceremonial, like walk and roll. You can walk, you can roll in your wheels if you need to, have your walker or your arm crutches, whatever assistive devices you need. We're all different. We're all going to get out there and do it. But it's a very short trek. But then we have like a big fall festival kind of thing where we have food and games and like a bouncy slide. And usually there's people dressed up as characters. And sometimes we'll have the fire department or the sheriffs come out because kids like to, I don't know, feel like they might be arrested. Last year we had the sheriff's department was putting handcuffs on some of the kids, and I was all for it. I'm like, yes, get them all. But it's just a really fun time. And the walk and roll is our biggest fundraiser. So it's like a peer-to-peer fundraiser. People build teams. My team is Angels for Avery. So I'm very excited about that. Avery is, now that she's 8, she's getting into fundraising too because there's a trophy at stake.
There you go.
And she would really like to get a trophy.
So where would
So
people go to learn more about you guys?
So our webpage is sbak.org, and then our walk page is sbakwalk.org, where you can check out some of the teams. You can even start your own team or donate to a team. And then Facebook is a great place to visit us. Just if you search the Spina Bifida Association of Kentucky on Facebook. We're posting constantly Spina Bifida facts and awareness, and even sharing stories about our community, because that's the best part, is the great people that make up our community.
Well, congratulations on being named interim director. Obviously, your passion for the work is contagious. It is our honor to have you share your journey, some great stories with us today. If you're listening and you can relate to Sarah's journey, please, in this episode, please share this podcast with other people. My goal is really to get this in the ears of people who really need it and could benefit from either some type of education from the podcast, maybe a little bit of motivation, a little bit of inspiration from hearing our guests, and then that sense of community, like Sarah mentioned, that idea that other people are in the same boat and they understand. So you're coming back to listen to us and our guests, and especially our nonprofit spotlights, because we're building that sense of community. So if you could go to our Facebook page for the Seeing Ability podcast, like that page, become a follower, and then share this episode with others. Sarah, thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you so much. I had a great time. I don't know if you noticed, but I really do enjoy talking.
We'll leave it at that. We'll see you guys next time. And thanks everybody for listening.